Exciting program, and what we hope very much to get out of it is that connections are made between the panelists, among the panelists, and between the audience and the panelists, and that those connections result in future collaborations. But one little bit of business before we start. Let's see, the agenda. Does everyone have an agenda? Anyone have any additions to the agenda? I think there's Gary wanted to make an announcement at the end, right? Okay, that's all. Okay, that's accepted. And minutes, I forgot to send the minutes, and then I did, and I noticed people actually looked at them. Speak up, okay. So anyone have any corrections or changes to the minutes that I sent out electronically? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll say those are accepted. And so now, panelists, please do sit down wherever you want. And I'll introduce you. Mayor's Office of Hope, Deputy Director, Mayor's Office of Hope, Housing Opportunity Partnership and Engagement. Next to her is Shira Noel, Policy and Advocacy Coordinator of Homeless Youth Alliance. Julie Leadbetter, Director of the San Francisco Navigation Center. Amy Farrow-Weiss, Founder and Director of St. Francis Homelessness Challenge. I noticed quite a few of you may have taken that, clicked on it anyway, so thanks for doing that. And Ken Fisher, Founder and Designer of RouteHome or RouteHome?
Either one.
RouteHome, I guess it depends where you're from. Okay, well thank you all very much, and Tony Kelly, our Vice President, will be the moderator. Take it away. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, let's do one thing first. I have a little bit of updates, and maybe you've already noticed what was in the papers today and what's been happening down on Division Street, the most appropriately named street in the city, today, and just what actually happened before this discussion. But maybe, Melody, let's go ahead and do that, then do this now. So Melody is houseless and was asked, just if you could share some of her experiences, and we could do 5 minutes, but that just as a keynote so we know what we're trying to get our arms around in this discussion. And my understanding is the microphone is for recording, not amplification. Is that correct?
Correct. Right.
They're very wide.
Hi, my name is Melody, and I've lived on the street since 2007 when I lost my apartment, and I began dwelling in a vehicle in 2008. This is a letter that I wrote to the SFMTA when they were trying to work with us around the parking around the Showplace Square. So, dear SFMTA, 1. On the morning of the day you wrote your email, August 5th, 2015, my friend Mark, a vehicle dweller younger than I, died. In 2011, SFMTA posted 72-hour warning notice on his legally parked truck, then towed it 48 hours after they posted the notice. By all rights, he was entitled to a full 72 hours to move it. He watched them tow it, unable to stop them. Of course, he did not have the exorbitant amount of money to get his truck back with all his possessions inside it. Next, when he went to retrieve the contents of his trucks at Auto Return, then located at 22nd Street Terminus, Pier 70, they refused to allow him to bring a vehicle onto the Auto Return property and refused to allow anyone else to come onto Auto Return property to help him unload his possessions from his truck. Thus, over the course of several days, he was forced to, by himself, unload his many possessions, heavy tools, equipment, machinery, welding equipment, etc., as he could onto the hand truck, then many times push the hand truck approximately 1/8 of a mile up a ramp road, the height of 20 feet or a 2-story building, where his friend was waiting with the truck. Many times as he pushed the hand truck past the auto return office, he could hear the people inside laughing at him. I cannot begin to tell you the struggles and aftermath that followed. Mark was one of the primary people in my inner circle of support, especially someone I could call on when my vehicle was not running. In regards to safe parking for oversized vehicles, staff at SFMTA have stated that SFMTA does not want to be in a position of deciding who is worthy and who is not worthy for parking. But I can tell you that the SFMTA meter maid and tow truck driver did decide that my friend was not worthy when they towed his home/truck, worth $6,000 to $7,000, plus all of the contents for his work, worth thousands more. FYI, Frosty, my partner, passed away Tuesday, June 25th, 2013. The following day, Wednesday, June 26th, Frosty's friend, E, moved his own camper across the street around 8 a.m. I came home and found 72-hour notices posted on the campers. The 72 hours notices were dated one day earlier, Tuesday, June 25th. This means that our friend E would have had to move his camper with the 72-hour notice plastered to the windshield, blocking his view, and not seen it. E's legally parked camper was towed Friday, 6/26/13, 48 hours after they posted the notice. By all rights, he was entitled to a full 72 hours to move it. So, 2. I'm thanking them for emailing me about what they're doing with the Showplace Square and all of the blocks around there. And they're going to be changing all the curbs so no oversized vehicles can park there. So to me, this is the equivalent of an eviction. Has anyone counted how many people are living in these vehicles on these streets in the boundaries defined by the Showplace Square, the California College of the Arts projects? If there was one oversized vehicle per block, that would be approximately 30 oversized vehicles or more. Where will all the oversized vehicles go? Isn't it time to make legal oversized parking available somewhere? Again, I am asking for a safe place to park, and I'm most grateful for your consideration. My name is Melody. I've been a resident since 1978. I attend the Bayview Police Community Meetings since 2009. I'm a student at Evans Campus since 2009. I'm a NERT volunteer since 2010. I'm a scrap volunteer since 2011, and I belonged to the San Francisco Folk Club since 1982. Question: how does taking away a man's only assets help him overcome being homeless? Answer: by deliberately, willfully, premeditatedly, intentionally stressing his physical and emotional health and maintaining that stress level until he suffers a premature death. You've probably known someone whose house is burned down in a fire. Regardless of the monetary value, whether you have $1 million home or a home in a cardboard box, the value of your home to your well-being is the same value of my home to my well-being. The difference between a fire destroying a home versus the DPW, the SFMTA, or the police destroying a home is that a fire may not be able to be prevented, whereas a home destroyed by the DPW, the SFMTA, or police is not only preventable, but it's intentional. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all for coming, and all the speakers that I'm sure are in this room. We're going to spend, I'm going to take about a minute, then we'll get into some opening comments here, and I have a question to ask everybody. We'll start with that, and then we'll try to get some provoking kind of dialogue up here, and then of course we'll blow it open to our very chatty membership. This is our entire meeting in this respect. This is important. And certainly what's been happening just in the past few days, I think really brings that home too. Because after a global situation with the storms and the Super Bowl and the housing crisis and everything else, so many tents in one location. There were sweeps over the past couple of days and today. So if you pass by Division Street, you probably may have seen the barricades set up to block the sidewalk because the previous things there were blocking the sidewalk. Sauce on anyone about that. And in fact, the flat part of Vermont Street, the street behind Best Buy, you see more, so it's one more case of for the postal law. This is why we're here, to try to get something better than that, a bigger solution than that. So if we can actually start, I don't know, I've always put on Emily on the spot, why not? And really to sort of, instead of doing opening sort of statements, I just want to throw a question out, which is, as things seem to be moving faster, for better or for worse, what do you think of the direction that they're going? And what can someone else, either at this table or in this room, do to help?
Yeah, you know, I think...
We're going to try to do like 2 minutes or so for the opening part.
Great. I'm not quite sure what you exactly you're referring to when you say the direction.
Yeah. How do you want to take it?
Sure, okay. I think there's a lot of situations, there's a lot going on right now in our city related to the issue of homelessness. We obviously have the encampments, which you guys have discussed and talked about. We also have new resources opening, like the Pier 80 shelter. And in December, the mayor announced a new department to address or end homelessness, still to be named. And I think that the direction that that department and that announcement made is a really positive thing. I think it really shows the commitment from the city to focus on long-term solutions for folks who are experiencing homelessness here in San Francisco, and really looking at building out nationally recognized best practices in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, emergency shelter. Certainly scaling the navigation center is a part of that. And I think that that direction is really positive. I think we also have a lot of really serious challenges. And I think we saw today about, today and over the past week, what we decide as a community is the right response to large homeless encampments is an ongoing debate within City Hall. I think it's a debate in every community that's having these meetings tonight, and I'm sure something we'll delve into a lot today. And so yeah, I'll just
what can someone else either at the table or in the room do to help?
Yeah, I think getting involved is the most important thing that you guys in the room can do, whether that's through volunteering or donating or going down and talking to folks in the tents and getting to know people. Whatever it is that feels right for you. What we need most in the city is people to care about this issue. And one of the things that the Division Street controversy and all of that has really brought up and has brought to my attention is just how much people do care. And sometimes, I've been on the provider side of this, and sometimes it feels like an uphill battle of just making the general public aware of the challenge and care. And I'm just excited to see how many people are passionate about this issue.
So, sure, same question's going to go to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
About this, about, any thoughts about current events, current direction that things seem to be going, either on the streets or in the city, and then what can someone at the table or the room do?
Well, being a provider and doing a lot on the policy side of things, as well as a lot of intensive street-based outreach with the folks on Division, with my youth, mainly in the Haight, who's also experiencing a huge wave of criminalization in the past 6 to 8 months, ramped up even more than we've seen in several years. I see that so many people are just wanting an alternative, wanting a different thing. So many people, about when we started going down to Division, maybe about 6 to 7 or 8 months ago, most of the people that were down there were waiting because they had heard that the navigation center was opening and was going to open, and they were there hoping to get picked up by the hot team to get into the program. And so it frustrates me a lot when we hear that, well, these people are refusing services, because what we really have been seeing is that there's just not enough services. And I think that what we can do as a community is to really pull together. We have been pulling together
very strongly, and I think taking that to City Hall and advocating, as well as the street-based things that we are doing and getting involved in the community as a whole is so powerful. We have a voice together. As Melody was saying, so do the folks that are living out there, and I think if we work together, we are unstoppable. And that's definitely been proven. This is San Francisco. We can make it happen.
So I'm going to try to keep it brief because you guys have heard a ton about the Navigation Center in the press and want to let everyone else have their time. But I think in terms of the positive side of this momentum and the direction, Navigation Center is one of those models that we're experiencing success. It is a hugely collaborative model from all aspects of the city, from DPW to the County Adult Assistance Program to DPH to Meals on Wheels to, I could go on forever, but it's not a cheap program, but it is an effective program. And there is a lot that we could do to share and spread what we're learning at the Navigation Center across the system. I think a lot of times, going toward what can we do for help, I think there's a lot of emphasis to start new navigation centers, to enhance the services. And I think in addition to expanding, which is a really exciting moment in San Francisco because, it's unheard of to be invited to a meeting and say, we want what you offer. As a homeless service provider, I spent my career fighting to get located, as you guys know.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's a new moment where people are really opening their arms in terms of compassion, but also because they're seeing an effectiveness. I think people are hearing the Navigation Center is effective. But in addition to expanding, I think we also need to slow down a tiny bit and look toward digging deeper. There's some quieter learnings that are coming out of the Navigation Center that are not going to be accomplished by rushing through things. It's going to be accomplished by thoughtful coordination, process improvements, system improvements. So some of the ways that we partner with city departments, for example, to support people to get on to income. That stuff is really hard work in terms of breaking through those bureaucratic barriers that exist. And I think in addition to pushing for more housing, which is absolute, for pushing for more services, which is absolute, I totally agree. People are not service resistant at all. People are asking for help over and over and over. It just needs to be provided in a way that doesn't make them feel worse, either physically, mentally, or some way. But in addition to that, we really need people to say, let's slow down and let's look at these things and let's really make sure that people are being supported on the various pillars of their life.
My first question after this was going right back. I forgot that for a second. But first we'll finish the first twice.
Sure. So the Department of Public Health and Ed Lee declared a public health hazard, and that's why they displaced people from Division Street. And everyone can agree that living on the street is actually a public health hazard for the people living on the street, and it contributes to livability issues in the area. But I handed out these to some of you, and they're at the front table. It's unconstitutional to criminalize sleep without offering another place to go. And so the issue is that when Ed Lee and the Department of Public Health say that everybody has to leave on Division, what happens? People go to a different place. And the issue with that is that and I've been spending some time on Division, I've been spending some time at Cesar Chavez and 101 with Ken. There's self-organization to these communities, and when people live next to each other and in community, they build up a social fabric, and they're also able to be contacted and worked with in a way because there's a group dynamic there. And so when people get disrupted and moved around, that's lost. And so what I would really ask us to do is that, I understand the idea of let's learn and take things slow to a certain extent, but we have thousands of people living in a state of daily crisis on our streets. And so the question is, what we need to do, and this is also on your sheet there, a state of emergency was declared by the DPW director, Mohammed Nuru, last year to get the Navigation Center started in January of 2015. I want Ed Lee, I want Julie, I want Emily, I want Sam Dodge, I want all of us to say we are in a state of emergency. Instead of telling people they just have to get up and go, and then saying it's a Department of Public Health issue and because people are going to the bathroom on the ground without offering a porta potty, we already have identified in the city, there are dozens, hundreds of places actually that are underutilized city property right now where we could say, we actually want people to go there. Maybe we have a max of 50 people per space. We start off with porta potties, we start off with basic services. Right now at Pier 80, it's about, it was a $500,000 setup with about $1,000 per month per individual that's there. Give these communities of 50 people $250 per person to work with. That's $12,500 per 50 people in a community. And then work together in that group to figure out what kind of services can we support with this. Maybe we have a hot team member that's staffed with some of that money. Maybe there's a porta potty. But this is what we have to do. I'm tired of waiting. How many people here are tired of waiting? We can't do this anymore. We can't say, like, kick this down the road anymore. I'm fed up because I've been working with people just like everyone here at this table, and we're tired of waiting. We need a state of emergency. We need Edley to take action and actually direct people to places that are more ideal for people gathering. Maybe it's expanding Pier 80. Who knows? But let's work towards that.
And I'm going to ask for kind of response.
I love that passion. That's awesome. See, that's what we need. The last 30 years, we've had homelessness here in San Francisco, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, untenable. This is a human rights issue, and I guess I'm really excited and really hopeful because I kind of feel like we're reaching this tipping point. And I feel like there's two things that I've really noticed looking at this kind of holistically big picture. People have started to become more empathetic and more compassionate, and I think that's crucial. I've seen conversations on Nextdoor start to shift. I've seen more political will build. I've seen offices emerge, and that's exciting. And then also I feel like there's just this like kind of massive income inequality. So from a system-wide standpoint, how do we kind of correct these imbalances and injustices? And there's some really interesting, fascinating stuff going on that I think really pertains to this, that I've been following. Some issues that have come about because of Hand Up. They are kind of microfinancing for the homeless. There's Lava May. They've been innovating these solutions by creating mobile bathrooms. So I think looking at our city and the brain trust that we have here and the money that we have here, there's really no reason why we shouldn't be able to get all 6,500 people living on the streets off the streets in a very, very quick fashion if we really put our minds to it. So I'm excited about these things. I feel like, I'd love to kind of talk about and show some of the ideas for just building housing. We need supportive services, but we need to just build this permanent housing with supportive services. And there's a lot of system reasons why those solutions have been squashed. And I think it's time for us as a community to come together and reevaluate these new innovative approaches and say like, hey, if we think differently, we actually have some very realistic, interesting solutions to solve this. So I'd love to hear what people have to say tonight, but I just want to leave you with that kind of inspiration that you have the power to help us change this.
And over here, the large area of boards and drawings over here is, I believe those are all yours, right?
I could talk about them. I've actually been meeting with a few different designers who all have different approaches, and I wanted to make them available so we can potentially discuss options.
And maybe at some point, then maybe some of that could even be passed around so people can get a look at it without everyone going up and taking a break. And then over here, too, Richard Sy, loyal Democratic Club member and booster member, has a proposal to put up, just thinking, outside the box or in a different kind of box, looking at the picture of containers, container housing, which has come up in a couple of settings before, but talking specifically about parking spaces for that. So that's open for people to look at too at some point in the evening. Before we get into sort of give and take, Julie, I want to ask you one question. So the center's been there how long now?
We opened March 30th of last year.
Got it. So almost a year.
Yeah.
What's your biggest surprise?
That it's really easy to run a program with pets. It's very easy to run a program with pets.
Wait, what about the rabbit that got trapped?
Yeah, well, the rabbit was adventurous, yeah. But no,
That's one big difference,
it's-
right? In shelters,
yes.
you can't bring a pet.
Yeah, yeah. But also more seriously, I mean, that it really was, and it's a major barrier for people accessing different services. But again, to reiterate, and I just need to address directly to Amy, I don't really appreciate your rephrasing. I don't appreciate Amy's rephrasing of this sense of urgency versus a sense of consistency, operational process improvement. I think what I'm talking about is something very serious in terms of systems change, and to compare it like that is unfair, I think. Yes, we need urgency. This project has moved extremely quickly. It's happening because there's great collaboration, but we also need to dig deeper, and we have to be willing to sit at the table with all kinds of people in order to do that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying sit back and, it's not the integration will happen later, you just wait for it. This is more about, no, we have this moment, we're all sitting together, and we've got to turn those wheels and keep them turning, and it's just not that easy to do.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely. We're all in favor of having a little bit of argument at the table.
Yeah.
Why all five of you are here. And in a second,
yeah.
after Amy's response, I want to get into what Ken happened to say about that there's enough money that solving this would be easy. That was a pretty interesting term to use. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you felt that I was attacking you in that way, because I did say I appreciate the way of
Not worried about-
focusing. Yeah,
not worried about the
yeah,
personal attack.
Yeah,
This isn't
it's
personal.
not it wasn't an attack. I mean, the thing is that I've been meeting with Ken, and I have been meeting with Sam Dodge and with Ed Lee and with different supervisors' offices over the last 2.5 months, and it just seems like a lot of kicking of the can in terms of responsibility, and so it's frustrating. But that being said, I'm one to really appreciate strategic planning, and so I appreciate that there's been a lot of thought that goes into the lessons learned from the Navigation Center. I've been looking at different models that are offered in Eugene, Oregon, in Portland, Oregon, in Seattle, and so we're looking at these different strategies and we're learning from them, and then there's also a certain amount of innovation that goes on. And so my frustration about not moving forward quick enough is when the DPH says everybody's got to go, this is a public health hazard, but there isn't a place to be able to say people are going to. And so it's just so much waiting that's going on right now, and I just get frustrated with that lag time.
Sam Dodge is Emily's boss, the current director of the Office of Housing Opportunity, Partnerships, and Engagement. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Good job.
Oh, yeah.
It'll change next week. But does anyone else want to respond to this exchange here? To jump in?
I do think, it's hard to ask people to go or to move somewhere when there isn't something being offered, and so I just do want to, talk a little bit about what is being offered. And the Pier 80 shelter was opened so very quickly, and has been
Before it was ready, right?
we were ready for a small group. So we started small, and each day over like a 2-week period expanded and expanded to make sure that we didn't have folks there without the things that they needed. But so Pier 80 opened softly on February 5th and has been expanding ever since. 178 folks from Division Street have come in to Pier 80, and the first weekend was rough. It was not ideal, and it's getting quite smooth now. Hot showers, hot meals, bathrooms, place to sleep. Going to be expanding that as well. And so there are things being offered. Not enough. I'm totally in agreement with everyone. We've got to do more, and there's absolutely a sense of urgency about that. But it's not that nothing is being offered.
Can I just respond to that and say, oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's Shira then.
I think that, and I think it was brought up earlier too, and it's about like when you hear about service resistance. So I toured Pier 80, and then I've also been speaking with a lot of people who either went there or were like frightened to go there because of the sort of prison motif happening. But I think it's really important to realize that the services being offered, to have a low threshold place, to have it where people can bring their pets, where people can bring their partners, is a super important thing. Because that's what's most effective. That's where people are going to want. I've heard stories about this woman was telling me just the other day, I just got released from the hospital and I really wanted to get out of the rain. The cops were telling me to move. I didn't know what to do, but I did not want to go someplace without my partner. That's all that I needed. So she ended up sleeping on the streets with her partner to be moved by the cops later and to have her belongings taken. But I think that's super important to keep in mind, that we really need that low threshold, and to have services that are right for that individual, or right for that couple, or right for that situation. And also in the sense of urgency, to keep with the urgency, I think that it's really important too that we do really start having more conversations around criminalization, because we have some really amazing and innovative ideas, but the criminalization is so not a solution. It's harmful, it's killing people, it's complicating, it's making it harder as a service provider to be able to connect and to reach people. It's having such a disastrous effect on our community and on our folks that are living out there, and as well for the people, the providers and the volunteers that are going out there too. So I think that's a really important conversation to have here amongst ourselves, and then also with our representatives.
You know, Amy and I were talking about this just the other day, but it's almost like the way we see it, there's these three tiers. There's people who need immediate help right now, and there's people who need transitional help, and then there's people, or there's a solution that is permanent housing. And we need to provide solutions at all three of those different tiers simultaneously. You know, so the navigation center is kind of in the middle. You know, Amy and I, and what we're doing, you know, like on the streets is that, you know, very like, you know, ground level. And then, you know, the permanent housing is something, well, yeah, it would be great if, you know, we had, you know, a few $1 billion in federal money to, you know, build permanent housing, which is, you know, what some of these solutions is addressing. But, you know, I think that framing it that way is a good way for us to kind of think about it. So, like, all these services can be working together, but we need to be thinking on these different levels or tiers.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, I think that is absolutely correct, that there's no one-size-fits-all response to homelessness. And permanent supportive housing is what is needed for the most chronically homeless individuals, folks with co-occurring disorders, folks who really need a little extra support. That is not the majority of people experiencing homelessness. It's actually a smaller portion. If, you know, there's, like, of course, a HUD wonky definition of that. But we need multiple tools in our toolbox to address a variety of needs. We need homelessness prevention resources. You know, we need rapid rehousing, short-term rental assistance for folks who, you know, within a couple of years could get back on their feet. And we're finding this very effective with homeless families. You know, the grant allocation can go up to 2 years, but we find most families, 15 months is when they can step off the subsidy because they're able to absorb the rent. So absolutely, and that is the sort of goal of the new department, is to be able to identify these multiple layers of service, multiple types, and to do a really good job of triaging people so that we're able to connect them with the right resource at the right time for them. It's not overhousing, not underhousing, and that's really the goal with all of this work, and why we want to coordinate services so much better than we currently are. Because right now we have a hammer when maybe what we need is a screwdriver. You know, like we are working with the wrong tools, or not enough of any of them. And so I think that Ken, that's an excellent point, because, you know, I was doing a focus group with clients at the MSC South today talking about the new department, and they brought this up, and they were like, you know, I might not need this, but I need this. And, you know, they brought up the idea. One gentleman had this like really exciting idea about like tiering folks, and it's a lot of what we talk about all of the time, about really assessing people's needs and using that to match them with the right intervention.
Well, that seems to be a big feature of the navigation center, is case management, right?
Case management and having placements for people. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think that's definitely critical here. And that's why I obsess about process improvement and bureaucracy and breaking through that stuff, because that's what we have to do. Right now, we're focused on housing outcomes. We get priority in our housing portfolio across the city. It gets kind of technical, but there's lots of different paths, and we can put people in different things depending on what they qualify for. So our navigation skills are used in a housing first manner, so put them in housing first. But you can use navigation skills to get people into healthcare. You know, we've also linked people with primary care. Homeless folks are often out of care, so a great way to look at some of the more street-based services, like you're saying, with the sort of, what do we need now? What do people need today? And then we could also, you know, navigate people through income supports, so getting on SSI or getting income at all. So there are different ways that we can look at that. I think it's important to look at navigation different from case management or from straight shelter provision, because you can't navigate unless you're connected to a broader system.
Yeah, sure.
I also think it's really an important part of the conversation to realize that the Navigation Center has been very amazing and helpful, that it's a really small part of the people that are sheltered or are seeking shelter right now. To get into a 90-day bed, I believe it's almost 800 people on the list, which equals to an average of about a 2.5 to a 3 month wait to get into a 90-day bed. And then when that 90-day bed expires, there's not, you just go right back onto the list. So it's this revolving cycle, and that's where a lot of the majority of our people that are in shelter right now are experiencing. And it's huge. I think just the number of people waiting to get into that 90 days to do that all over, being almost 800 people, says a lot right now too. And I think another really important thing, I know in the hate, especially like with the Homeless Youth Alliance, we lost our lease in 2013 as a drop-in center, and that was a place where our youth could come in and get a shower and eat, use the internet, have a very non-judgmental, safe place where they could just be themselves and not be judged, where we could help them with mental health care if that's what they wanted, with medical care. We had a doctor on site, with harm reduction services, so we could provide safer sex kits, we could do needle exchange, we could do triage, we could help if they're ready to get clean and sober, we could help with those different resources. And since we lost our center, we've applied for over 140 different properties and been turned down just because of what we do and who we are. And I think that's a really important thing to consider too. And navigation, I go to so many community meetings, it's incredible. And like navigation centers, what about in the hate? What about for these youth? What about for that? And I think just like we really have to fight back too, just amongst the community, with our neighbors, with our friends. I think it's really important to have these conversations, that if we're all going to be not in my backyard about stuff, if we're all going to have this NIMBY attitude, then we can't do any of these things, and we really have to change that on the ground level. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the exciting things about this group of neighbors and what these guys are doing, because the temporary solution of the Navigation Center, so we're only temporarily occupying a site at 16th and Mission, and that has been amazing in terms of our ability to site it. And so we're actually now beginning to look at ways to design a fully mobile navigation center. So a slight variation on this, where we're not looking at developing individual housing for people, because we'll leave that to the affordable housing providers that are very savvy at doing that. But we're looking at developing the commercial aspects of our navigation center with some congregate stuff next to it, so that we can move it from site to site. And it's been a great use of resources, because we don't have to pay rent, our land is free. We partner with affordable housing developers that have just land sitting there while they're going through the permitting process. So I think that's one of the major things that we've learned, and would love to donate that to other people in terms of scaling the navigation model. I think that's one thing that we could do, and could also use a lot of technical assistance, because as I'm sure you guys are learning, and as any architect designers out there, the container situation is not cheap, and it's, you know, it has its particularities, but if we could begin to do
So how do we scale that up, right? Because we're getting some pretty articulate, you know, descriptions of what the needs are, and we get some really articulate descriptions of what's being done, but what's being done is this big, the need is this big, and then we have random individuals with great hearts and brilliant minds saying, well, what about this, this, and this? But that's also small because it's, you know, almost theoretical. So how do we scale this up? How do we close that gap there? You want to go first on that? And then I'm sure someone will talk about that.
So there's communities like Dignity Village and Right to Dream 2 up in Portland, which, you know, we've studied to, you know, kind of understand how you take a holistic approach to providing these like kind of self-regulated communities. That's one idea that creates communities that are kind of interspersed with existing communities. That has worked in one particular area. In terms of scaling things, though, I mean, that's where I'm particularly interested. I've also been, you know, researching quite a bit affordable housing and how do we kind of address, you know, some of the really crucial issues that we're facing, you know, in San Francisco, whether we were homeless or not. And one of the people that I came across is this gentleman, Patrick Kennedy, who is looking at building 100 units of prefab containers. It's 165 square feet. It has a bathroom, it has a shower, it has a kitchen. You know, it's a micro unit, but it can be built for about $1,000 a unit, assuming it's servicing a homeless individual, because the cost of the land would be free, like Julie was mentioning, and it can be built in 8 days. So it can also be disassembled if it was the option was to not, you know, kind of have it be permanent housing. But again, you know, kind of dealing with this, you know, NIMBY attitude, there's a lot of resistance from the community. You know, I talked about, you know, bringing my 16-month-old son to the navigation center, and people kind of look at me like with this gaping face, like, wow, that's a dangerous area. Like, why would you subject your son to? And I think that like once you spend time with our neighbors who happen to not have homes because they're less fortunate than us, you realize that there are consequences to that, and there's trauma with that, and you know that there's not as big of a wall as you may think that, or some people may think that there is. And so for me, you know, it's providing these solutions, and then, you know, convincing the rest of the community that may be naysayers that, you know, there should be homes in their communities, and that's an acceptable solution. So I don't know, just looking at your faces now, I kind of feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but it would be nice if a lot of other folks in the city, you know, kind of had that same empathy and compassion.
165 feet is about 8 times the size of this table, right?
It's not very big.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the focus that we've been putting on right now in terms of locations was in particular Cesar Chavez and 101, which is pretty much in your neighborhood. And the reason why is because we went to City Hall and we said, where could we try something like this out, where it was more, you know, it's not the navigation center because we don't have placement at the end, but it's interim services that are necessary, like a porta potty, you know, some monitoring so people can get safe sleep, because we talked to Michael, who lived at Cesar Chavez in 101. He might have been rousted out by CHP now because they're putting the squeeze on people and saying they're going to arrest folks. But Michael, I asked, you know, how much continuous sleep do you get in a day? And he said at most, you know, maybe 2 hours, because he's in a position where he's looking out after his community. And it was like, well, what if there was someone like one of us who could work with you, or we could help to create some kind of organized system where people could get sleep in regular intervals, and there could be a porta potty, and we could work together in that way. And there's a positive response to that. I've never really gotten too negative a response to that, except that people don't think that it could actually happen, because where would the will be for something like this? So we looked at Cesar Chavez and 101 because that's where people were. But now there's discussion of a place that's nearby that's a parking lot that might be suited because it's underutilized. And I can't stress enough that it's really City Hall's job right now to be able to, I think they've identified these places already, but really the focus is on give us a list of the places where people can actually start to set up these communities or go to, and then allow some kind of funding or allow people to self-fund and fundraise privately to be able to try these things out. Because what do you really have to lose? It can't really get much worse. So why don't we try something? And then at Pier 80, you know, there's lots of space there. And I agree that it's an unwelcoming environment if you look on the outside right now, and people are focusing, I think, too much on that and really not enough on its potential, its space. And so what if instead of the HSA and St. Vincent de Paul taking it upon themselves to say, we have this budget and we're going to set this place up, why don't they open it up to the community and say, we're looking for volunteers to help try out some of these types of things on the parking lot of Pier 80, and we can try it out. I was just in Oakland this weekend. They had a build out. There's a guy named Greg, and there's a woman named Vanessa who actually lives in San Francisco, and they organized an event where people were building tiny structures for people, and there was so much positive response that they had to turn people away. There's a lot of creativity here. We're the headquarters of Burning Man, for crying out loud. People know how to build things. There's an interest. I was on Division with the Porta Potty this last week, offering the service that the DPH doesn't seem to be able to do. And there was a guy that walked by and he said, I'm an architect. I know engineers. We can do this. We can, and you know, Ken meets people all the time too who are interested in doing this kind of work and have the volunteer capacity. So I think it's about opening it up, but really it's about finding those spaces and saying this is where we can try things.
So what are the kind of barriers on these kinds of things then? Because we've got enough people volunteering ideas, right? Here, in lots of places. And yet how many of them actually get taken up? You know, how many of them actually come across, and why is that? Like, what's the barrier there? What's stopping that? Is it just bureaucracy? Is it liability stuff? What happens?
I think it's all of the above, and you know, on the good positive side, it's a very nuanced, hopeful, and caring conversation about where do we put our precious resources to get the most benefit of well-being for people. And then on the other side, it can really be about being fearful of things and seeing things tried but failed. You know, right now, LA embraced the tiny home thing for a while. They're sweeping everybody now. So, you know, there is a...
Why did that happen?
Because the tiny homes are tough when you put them on streets, because then they become the sidewalk barriers, they become the other things. So you see the pendulum of support swing a little faster than other things, I think. So in some ways, while we had Portland and Seattle's coming to visit too, and Portland came down, and I had the opportunity to meet with the guy who used to be a really deep embedded facilities guy in Portland government for a long time. He retired, and he was like, what do I want to do with my retirement? I want to help the Portland mayor start up these encampments, and we're going to go for it. And he was the exact right person to do it because he was patient. He was willing to sort of accept some level of chaos and possible failure. But again, on the other side, we tried to bring in folks from Division today, and this has happened many times already, where the tiny homes are preventing them from moving and from moving in. So, you know, folks who don't have as much stuff, because we've had to get cranes out there to move them, right? And so they want to stay with them. And we try to provide services from the street, but it's sort of a structural barrier that really can be troublesome, but also prevents or provides a lot of safety. So it's tough, and it's really interesting to me that the conversation is emerging right now. And I gotta say, personally, not speaking the mayor's office of housing, I don't know where I fall on it, because I've seen it fall out in all kinds of different ways.
Do you want to add to that?
No, I'm really glad Amy brought up sleep, like, that it's so important. You know, I've been a service provider far longer than I've worked at the mayor's office, so that's sort of where my heart and head come from. And sleep deprivation is incredibly painful. And you can see that in the folks' ability to manage their own mental illness, folks' ability to get to their appointments or the basic care. And we're really excited because Gubbio Project, are you guys familiar with Gubbio Project in the Tenderloin? It is a sacred sleep project. And they open up St. Boniface Church, which is right on Golden Gate at Jones, maybe? Between Jones. And it's one of the most amazing churches. I'm not a particularly religious person, but going there is like a deeply moving experience for anyone. And they open up the pews all day, from early morning to mid-afternoon when folks can't be at the shelters to let them sleep. And it's a beautiful project. And we're really excited to be able to help support Gubbio 2, which opened in the Mission. And you know, I think we do. Sleep is incredibly important. And I think, you know, so anyway, I was just really glad to hear you bring that up because it is so vital to folks. And I think, oh, sorry.
No, keep going. I just wanted to piggyback. I think this point that Julie brought up about the pendulum swinging, about, you know, about embracing in LA of tiny homes and then not. I mean, was it because people sort of started treating that as tent cities part 2, and so it's the same thing of like, well, I just don't want to see all these tents, therefore I don't want to see all these boxes.
Yeah, at first the public embraced it, and then it swung back, so it was really like, it came down on folks. But again, how do you value that? I think probably listen to people in terms of, you know, I don't know.
I think it's
We're going to look at the bunches in a moment, yes.
really challenging. Seattle, you know, that tried something like this, and there was an article in the Seattle Times, I think from Friday. Anyway, it was really interesting because you have the mayor of Seattle saying, we gotta try, okay, I'm gonna try this. And you have Obama's point person saying, oh dear, this is, you know, we have people on the same side, if there are sides, on this issue who are struggling to reconcile and around this. And I think it's not unique to us. We're having this conversation all over the country. People are really struggling with how much, what is government's role, right? And, you know, is government's role to focus on long-term permanent solutions? Is it government's role to work on emergencies? I think it's a little bit of both. Actually, it's a lot of both. It's all the above, but.
So Shira, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
Okay, so I not to keep repeating myself, but I think that as we're having these broader conversations, I think like the sit-lie law, when we were talking about sleep and we're talking about how important it is to be able to have like a good night's sleep in St. Boniface is amazing. The Gubbio project is fabulous. They open it up, you can sleep on the pews, but it's still just open during certain hours. And if you have a tarp with a sleeping bag and a dog and all this stuff, you're not going to want to abandon that to be able to go into. So it works great for many individuals, not for every individual. But I think that when we have these sit-lie laws that are criminalizing the act of sleeping, that's really what's causing this huge amount of sleep deprivation. And I think that so since 2011, since the 2011 enactment of the sit-lie law, over 38 of our youth have died in the hate for many reasons. It's a huge factor. We're seeing people, we have kids that have experienced much trauma, PTSD, and maybe some mental health issues, safety reasons. They're staying awake and they're scared to sleep. They're scared of getting these tickets. They're scared of sitting down, which is also huge. So I think really advocating for a change there is super helpful and super important. I also wanted to mention really quickly that as Julie was saying, that while the Navigation Center is doing these great things, it is a small portion of our homeless population that are able to seek shelter there, and Pier 80 is also at max capacity, that both of these centers are getting slated to close soon. So that's also a thing that we really need to keep in mind, and to fight for that extension so that we can talk about doing these other things, opening it up as a safer parking program. I believe I think this number is fleeting, about 257 vehicularly housed people in San Francisco right now, give or take. But I mean, we could do a safer parking program there. We could do other things there, but we really have to advocate for these spaces to remain what they temporarily are right now, or to find something else before we shut them down. So I did just want to mention that too. Okay.
I just didn't want to leave Shira hanging, because I was going to back you up on the criminalization thing, because it's definitely something that we all very much agree on. from the locals now to the feds. We're getting very clear direction from the feds that we can't criminalize if we don't have alternatives for people. And I think neighborhoods in particular, especially lovely neighborhoods like San Francisco, lovely neighborhoods, hold on to these tools that seem like tools. Like sit-lie is the only thing that people have if there's an encampment that seems to be getting a little out of control, that they don't feel safe around anymore. It's like the only tool, but if you talk to the police, it's not a useful tool. If we shift it slightly to more of a public health approach where it becomes about health and safety, the only thing that the tickets are doing is causing us all to pay more money. Like, they don't get paid by people, and they create an administrative burden on our city. So those are things that we could do.
My father was homeless. He died at the Trans-Bay Terminal. He was in the first wave in the early 80s. So this is in early 1984, he passed away at the Trans-Bay Terminal. And that was at a time, because it was the beginning of the homeless wave, it was very easy to put blame, like, oh, it's your own fault that you ended up there. As a rebellious 21-year-old, I was certainly willing to believe that too, right, about my father. And that still comes up, right? I mean, there's a reason why C.W. Nevius isn't on this panel, right? But it has come up. It has been a consistent thing, in the debate, especially over the past month, about, oh, you shouldn't give more tents out. Mm-hmm. It just encourages folks. I mean, those kinds of things that come up. So I like that we're, talking about some of the real barriers, but that's also real barriers to people's heads about it. It keeps coming up again in that way that pendulum sort of swings. Mm-hmm. I see you guys there. I'm just going to open it up to the audience as well, but I want to don't forget what you're going to say, because I'm sure it's all going to come back. We'll go to Chris first. I know Mr. Boileau's got a question.
Thank you very much. This has been very helpful. I was an affordable housing developer for 25 years, and in a lot of ways it just didn't work. So I've become somewhat obsessed with just the issue itself. It seems like no matter what we do, we build lots of supportive housing, we provide bus tickets, we open navigation centers, we reduce significantly the chronic homeless, right? All those things that you see, but the number of homeless people stays at 6,500. And I wonder about that, and it's hard for me to understand. Like, no matter what we do, the number stays at 6,500. Why is that? And it doesn't move. I mean, since 2002, the number has stayed exact. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but statistically relevant. It's statistically irrelevant. The number is 6,500. And if we build 1,500 supportive housing units in 3 years, right, which is a remarkable piece of work, the number stays at 6,500. If we bus 9,000 homeless people, and I'll stipulate to housing somewhere else, the number stays at 6,500. So,
are these assertions that you can source?
Yeah,
It's true.
Published census, the biannual census. So it's why I'm particularly excited about Amy's opening comments, just because if the number, quite frankly, and I don't mean that we haven't helped a lot of people, I think we have, but if the number is always going to be 6,500, right?
We're creating new ones, too.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I understand that, but even though like, for instance, you're right, when we significantly reduced the number of chronic homeless people, we saw almost exactly the same number of first-time homeless fill the gap.
So I think there's actually a bunch of city responses, but the reason I want to respond first is just because we've zoomed out and looked at this like from a global standpoint, and again, it comes back to income inequality. I was just in Zurich and talking to a whole bunch of people there, and homelessness is like not an issue. So when you look at, how public resources are used and when they're used strategically and well, like this problem shouldn't even exist. And in a lot of European countries, it doesn't exist. So like, that's why I feel like from a system standpoint, like we need to think differently. And it's really interesting if you take a look at a lot of the talks that Rose Broom, the director of Hand Up, has been doing. You'll see that she talks a lot about this idea of basic income, which, you know, like that's another area to go, but it really fascinated me, and it's the reason why I got so passionate about this issue. As a documentary filmmaker, I worked with a lot of organizations, and I started getting tired of like telling the same story over and over again, and I started to want to figure out how to change the system instead of just trying to change things from like the smaller political level. So I guess I would encourage people, and you know, maybe take a look at, you know, solutions like basic income, which treat this at a whole different kind of system-wide level approach.
So kind of just to go off that, I mean, our wage disparity here, they do, I think it's biannual report on wage disparities worldwide, and we ranked right behind Rwanda as far as the wage gap from inequality. Yeah, it goes in San Francisco, which is huge. And out of the about 67 homeless people, and you always have to think that the number is higher than what is counted. 71% were living in San Francisco when they became homeless. We have it's amazingly huge housing crisis that we've been experiencing for the past 4 to 5 years. We have the displacement, the mission all over the place. Everywhere you look, every neighborhood you go to, you can find a building that has a sign in it that says, "We are being evicted. There is an Ellis Act. We will not go." The people that turn out in the streets for the actions that I've seen around anti-displacement movement in San Francisco is huge. So I think that we were able to house 5,000 people in X amount of years, but how many more people did we create a homeless situation for as a city and through the policy of City Hall? And I think that's really what we see a lot as far as the youth go too. So many of our youth are coming out of foster care with no place to go, or being just speaking specifically to the youth now, that's why you don't really see that number change very much, or coming out of juvenile justice systems, aging out and not having a place to go into. And that number stays really steady. At that same time, as well as our residents and ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, our families being displaced and finding nowhere else to go to but the streets and not wanting to leave San Francisco because there isn't any place else to go. We're also seeing our organizations displaced. We're seeing our services displaced. We're seeing our providers displaced. We were displaced. We are now the Homeless Youth Alliance. Justice Kuza just got displaced. It's become an epidemic. So while we are doing this, I think we see the numbers staying the same due to our policy in the city around.
I think I've heard. Actually, I'm going to throw this to Emily and see if there can be an answer to this or not.
Okay, I have an answer to this.
Is that right? Well, is that no? I mean, I've heard this inside City Hall and out that the way that this issue has been budgeted, especially over the last 10 years, is that the city is budgeting to manage the homeless problem rather than solve. And that's one reason why you might get this eerily similar number year to year of like, well, that's enough, because after all, there are other needs, and et cetera, in a finite city budget. I mean, confirm, deny, it kind of.
Yeah, that's a huge thing too. And then in Los Angeles, I don't know what the number is here, so I can't really say, but in Los Angeles, they have a $100 million homeless budget, and $80 million of that they found was going to policing, which is very big too. So when we talk about the homeless budget, we really have to look at where that money is being allocated to. A lot of it does go to continue supportive housing for folks already housed, and not necessarily creating new permanent housing for people to transition into.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways this budget should grow every year if we want to see the number of people experiencing homelessness go down. Because, you know, I know there was an article in the Chronicle fairly recently that I think the 241 million, it's not a particularly accurate number, but it's what was in the Chronicle. But 118 million of that is to continue permanent supportive housing. That's not an investment we're going to back away from. You know, we
want that.
We want that. That's what we want to be investing in. But in order to continue to bring people off the streets and into housing, we need to continuously increase new units that are being brought online. And, just a couple of points about the steady state number around the 6,800, and, everything that you said was very accurate. And I am in no way saying the status quo is okay. I mean, there's a reason we're all here tonight, and the reason you're all here tonight, we don't think the status quo is okay. Communities around us, our neighboring communities, have seen homelessness skyrocket in a way that we haven't here. And I think that actually is indicative of San Francisco being very committed to this issue and to putting in a lot of local money. I used to do work on this issue in another community that had no local money, very little local money put in it. It was all about federal money. And in most parts of the country, federal money is what is used to address homelessness.
There are counties near us that have no shelters.
No shelters, or no, they might have faith-based shelters, but not city-funded shelters. We're in a really good opportunity because we have more local control in that way. But about 30, 40, and you're an affordable housing developer, you could probably tell me more accurately than I can. Federal government walked away from building and supporting affordable housing, whether that be public housing, workforce housing. The city absolutely has to step up, do more, do better, always. But our federal partners have backed away from this issue. The Obama administration has tried through the stimulus package. They put a ton of money on the table, and we actually didn't see the spike in homelessness that everyone predicted during the 2008 recession because of the $1 billion that were put into homelessness prevention at that time. We have to hold the federal government accountable. They have to be at the table with us. It cannot be municipalities solving this on their own. It really has to be a partnership, and with the state as well. That's certainly an area for continued advocacy. President Obama put a lot of great proposals in his last budget. I'm not holding my breath for Congress to pass them, but if you want to get involved in some advocacy, that would be incredibly helpful.
So many places are declaring states of emergency for homeless. Portland and Seattle and Hawaii. Can we do that? Wouldn't that help? Wouldn't that be get the federal government giving us more money and maybe getting the people in the city to really see it's a crisis? That part of the problem is the lack of compassion people have. They don't get that they're these human beings that are suffering.
Well, as it says on the sheet, the DPW actually declared a crisis of homelessness in January of last year in order to move the contract process forward quicker with the navigation center. So it was declared. I don't think we got out of it. So I think we're continued. But I guess the focus that we're trying to approach right now is there's a crisis. How do we deal with it in San Francisco? But I think to your point and to your point, it really is a federal issue as well. And I don't hear Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders talking about it at the national level, which is really interesting. He's going to build a wall around San Francisco.
Bob, then Tanya, then Richard.
If there's always 6,500, approximately 6,800, whatever it is, and we're now spending 241 million at least on this problem, how much more money do we need for whatever solutions are available? And what's the mayor doing about getting that? Where does he intend to get it from?
Yeah.
Because the feds are not, as long as the Republicans control Congress, they're not going to come up with the money.
That's going to end soon.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I don't have an exact dollar amount. It's actually something I was trying to figure out today and realized my math was terribly off. So I need to keep working on getting, what is that, like?
We would love to have it, no matter how big it is, just knowing it's a number.
Yeah.
Means we could do something about it.
Working towards that, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there are conversations about how to bring in more support for homeless services, both philanthropically, but also through advocacy at the state, advocacy at the federal government. One of the big areas that we might be able to increase resource coming into the community is the ability to use Medi-Cal money to provide supportive services within permanent supportive housing, and that's a new use of that federal resource, which is really exciting, because so far a lot of that money's come out of our general fund, and we could repurpose those if we can draw down that money, we can repurpose federal fund or local dollars to expand other homeless services that we're looking to do. So that's an area of focus.
We're gonna go Amy, then Ken, then Shira, and then your question.
And like I was saying, if you look at the price of a Pure 80 experiment, $500,000 setup, about $150,000 to $220,000 is what I've heard per month to operate, which is, on an operation cost per month, without even factoring in the setup cost, is about $1,000 per person per month. And so I was just throwing out some numbers today on my iPhone, okay, if we had $250 per person in one of these 50 people villages, we like to call them St. Francis villages, but we're not, they could be called anything, but $50 per person, 50 people, $250 per month is something like $7,500, which ends up being like $150,000 per 50 people per year, which if you had 50 of those with 50 people in them each, which is 2,500 people, something like that, you get it's about $7.5 million. So, and that's the amount that we missed out on more or less for the Super Bowl, right? I mean, everybody was paying attention to that, and so could we get? If we had $5 million to start off with, that would be a start to try to implement some of these things.
So just to reiterate, this meeting that I had yesterday with this gentleman, Patrick Kennedy, the number would be $6.5 million. So $1,000 a unit is what he's proposing. He can realistically build. That number blew my mind because it's so incredibly cheap. We would have to find land, and I think that is the biggest obstacle. And of course, that doesn't include staffing it up. So, we need to talk about, and Julie could probably answer this best, because she knows how many caseworkers is, the best number for, kind of per head, maybe it's, I don't know, navigation 65, and there's 3 caseworkers, so about 20 folks to a caseworker. So, I'm not sure what that, I'm not good at the quick math, but you have social workers at these sites, and then the building costs, if we are looking at new kind of, innovative alternatives, to me, hearing about these solutions is really exciting. And I guess all I'm saying is, I think it's a lot cheaper than we may think if there is that political will there.
I had one conversation with someone I won't name inside the mayor's office who seemed like they would know about these kinds of things, and he came up with a number that was about 10 times that. Right. But even that is a surprisingly low number, 65 million or so. Sure.
It totally is, but I also think it's really important, and although the budget analysis or the budget hearing meetings can sometimes be very challenging, they're really important too, because like I was talking about with LA with their $100 million homeless budget, really paying attention to how the money is being allocated to, and then really getting into those hearings and being to advocate for more, not only for more, but for certain things, for the funding to purchase land, for the funding to be able to have more staff, for the funding for all these other different things. And on that note, tomorrow there is actually a hearing at City Hall at 10 a.m. in room 250 about budget analysis for the Shelter and Navigation Center hearing. So I absolutely invite everybody who's able to come and participate in some awesome public comment.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the subjects at that hearing is asking the funding list analyst that question.
Yes.
What would it take? Right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Julie?
Are we talking what would it take? So the numbers here are housing 1,000 people, you're saying, right? How many?
6,500. So I was just doing the math, and I realized it's $1,000 a month. So the number is 65 million.
Okay.
$1,000 a month.
For how many people?
And they want to rent it to us at $1,000.
Right, right. So the thing here is there's capital costs and operating costs, and it's the operating costs ongoing that's gonna get us, and that they also increase because that goes with cost of living, all that. So I think that the general rule of thumb for developers, those who have committed their whole lives to do affordable housing, is you can't build yourself out of this crisis. And that's when it gets super painful, when we're seeing, and even though we're seeing a steady state at 6,500, we're actually seeing significant population shifts right now within that number, which is disturbing in ways that we haven't seen before. So we're seeing, well, just in general, people are getting older and sicker. Therefore, supportive housing is going to grow in its need. We're getting better at trying to help people age in place, but that means for people who don't have families, that's going to be a burden on us. The preservation, city's terrible at preservation. We're allowing people to get evicted, so we are actually seeing people, and this is very hard for navigation because we keep people at navigation until we house them. We find it to be a burden. That's our burden, not their burden. So there's no 90-day stays for us. If you know, no matter what your barriers are, you stay with us. And therefore, we've had some people there since the beginning because we haven't been able to quite put the puzzle together, you know? But why was I saying that? I was saying that because some of those people are working poor, which we haven't seen for a while, trying to squeeze into the chronic homeless population, people who are hanging in there and lost their housing, and that's growing. A lot of people, you know, the sort of short-term rental crisis is very, very real. We're seeing, you know, we all like to sell whatever it is we got to do a little bit better, you know, but it's not helping from a city perspective. So I think we really need to push all of those policy things and protect the people we've got here.
In order to get four more questions and a wrap up in the next half hour, I'm going to go try to push for choppier, shorter responses. I'm going to go Tanya, then Richard, then Jake, then Chris.
Okay, I have a comment and then I have a serious question. My comment is, we were talking about government doing this, and I think if Zuckerberg and Chan can give $75 million to the General Hospital, then there's got to be somebody in Silicon Valley who can give $75 million to homelessness in San Francisco. I mean, I think we just have to go out. I mean, you guys are talking about doing it as volunteers, and I think we have to go out and find the money from the private sector. But the serious question I have for Emily is, I wonder if the mayor's office or some other agency could create a one-stop shopping website where somebody like me can go and find out about all you different groups and what you do, what your mission is, what your passion is, how I can get involved, and what is being done by the mayor's office on what tier of activity, so that, you know, because what I hear is so much frustration from people about, you know, what's being done, but I'm not hearing, and I don't see a place where I can go and find out. On a daily basis, or on a monthly basis, what are the changes happening this month? Or, you know, what's the trend and where's the need? So I'm just wondering if something like that could be created where there'd be a link to Amy and a link to Ken. And I could say, gee, that's where I'd like to put my energy. And I can send it to all the people on Nextdoor, and I can send, you know, who are yammering about the homelessness and say, well, here, why don't you get involved?
Yeah. There are some websites around service provision. You know, if you wanted to volunteer in like at a shelter or, you know, at different groups, there definitely are websites around that. And for folks who are on the street who are looking for resources, there are some decent ones. None of them are great, and keeping them up to date is always the challenge. But One Degree is supposed to be sort of like a Yelp of homeless services. I still think like the old Homeless Wiki is kind of the best one of all of them, even though everyone's trying to get really fancy and like outdo it. I still go to the Homeless Wiki and find its information. But in terms of systems change, policy, what's being done on an ongoing basis, there's not a website that I know of. I know the coalition posts stuff, different people post things.
What was the One Degree?
One Degree.
It's onedegree.org. It's
or 1DEG.
1DEG.
Yeah,
It's why can't the mayors, you know, because I'm going to go to the government first.
Okay.
Because I don't know about all you guys, and I don't know about all these places. But I do know that if I go to the government, I should be able to get at least a place where I could find out about all those websites. And I can say, okay, I'll go look on this one and that. Like a 311 for homelessness.
I mean, there is stuff on 311, but yes, I hear what you're saying, and I can take that recommendation back.
So I also do a lot of volunteering with the Homeless Coalition, quite a bit. And I have to say, I'm sure you guys have all seen people with the $2 donations for the street sheets, but there is a wealth of information about what's happening, who's doing who's doing what, where you can plug in, what's going on, what people are experiencing. It literally is a wealth of information. You can also subscribe to it, so we could send it to your house every month if that's something you'd be interested in. But I highly recommend. It's a great way to stay in touch and in tune with what's happening right now.
With a phone number, 311, I tried to call them one time. I was wondering probably somebody that was homeless and really ill, I was trying to get help. There was too much stuff on there. I mean, it was just too much stuff. One number that goes to homeless help would be fantastic.
I'm just following up what you've already mentioned, but I'll probably raise a question. What has been done in terms of seeking private money, especially the big tech companies, which arguably are part of the problem? I mean, they're certainly interested in kind of the halo effect of, monetary contribution.
Well, the center existed because of some contribution from
Yeah, we
someone.
got started with the $3 million donation from a lovely person. Downtown Streets, which is a great new organization that's on the scenes, got a $5 million contribution from Silicon Valley. I would love to see this shift. Unfortunately, the history of philanthropy is that it's, a very tiny percentage of our overall spending budgets on services that we need in our communities. But given the disproportionate wealth, I think we should be able to see disproportionate gain and relationship building. And the truth is, the relationship building is the most lasting and the most important and has the most legs.
And can I just say something real quick about
yeah.
that? Yeah, so, Pier 80 is leased to the city, city-owned property, but it's $1 a month, so it's not really an issue around the cost of the land. And so I think it's really, once again, City Hall needs to designate a certain amount of properties and then say this property could be developed if we had private investment or if we were able to allocate some funds. It's really up to City Hall right now to really identify and declare that these places are open for this kind of work. So, what you're proposing, what we're trying to do can actually get off the ground.
Jake, Carlin, Chris.
I would second Amy, your homeless challenge found it very insightful and as well kind of self-aware in terms of what I did not know. The sleep thing was by far the most kind of aha, light bulb, oh my God, I can't, was that person that I just saw crazy or have they been up for like 9 days?
Yeah.
That's, that really, so maybe bring that up to the top might have better impact on that. Second point, and this has to have been thought of, I would think, but just some sort of, as much as I don't like propositions, but some sort of a proposition on new sales of homes in San Francisco, which again is part of the problem of what's causing this, and then that would be an ongoing mechanism to fund some of the operational.
That's on the table.
That's on the table.
Yeah.
Good. Much smarter people than myself. And then lastly, what's the one question or comment that you get that just drives you crazy, and what's the best way to respond to it?
I'll say that, what a barrier that we come up against all the time is that people are just thinking that we need to focus on permanent housing solutions. And so we're ready to be part of the wave of saying interim is as important as long-term. And so I keep getting that from City Hall and from people saying it has to be permanent solutions. And it's like, hey, if we could snap our fingers and in 2016 we could have housing for those 6,500 people, great, but we know there's gonna be thousands of them on the street throughout 2016, throughout 2017, so we have to do something because people are in a daily state of crisis.
And we haven't talked, I'll put a little old-fashioned plug-in for food. It's so important, just like sleep. And twice today now, I saw former clients of ours who had been with us. We watched their health improve over a couple months. We placed them into housing. They have very little income now, very little access to food. They're so thin. They're so thin. And this is in a month, month and a half. So I really think the food supports is going to be something, it's a super low-cost solution. We can scale it. I mean, the way we provide it is actually expensive, but I think we could improve it. And it's neighbor to neighbor. It really is neighbor to neighbor.
Carla?
I'm still back with all of these letters at the beginning and talking about taking away the places that some people do have with insufficient notice and criminalizing homes that have wheels. And I don't know, it's reminding me of a book I read years ago that takes place in India, but it follows these folks that go from living on the edge to living less, and they keep getting victimized by high-handed and policies of government, and it's just I hated this book because I just didn't like it. But I find myself thinking about it so often these days because it's what I see happening, and what I hear you talking about there, and the sit line law is part of that. And I don't know where there's a question in that, but can we do something about the people who come in and take away the home with the tools and then not let a reasonable way of getting them out of it? I mean, isn't there something that we can?
We're working on it. We have a group of lawyers. I'm on the board of the Homeless Action Center over in the East Bay, and there's a bunch of lawyers here as well who are looking at basically piggybacking off of this recent Department of Justice ruling saying that it's not illegal to treat somebody as a criminal in these circumstances, and so they're trying to create a litigious path to stopping the city. Yeah.
Super quickly too, and also RAP, the Western Regency Advocacy
Project
has a homeless bill of rights. So this year we've had to redo it several times, but it's been amended. It's called SB 567. It's super easy, like the song. Yeah. So SB 567, and it would decriminalize sleep. So it would basically retract the sit-lie law. We were just in Sacramento advocating for it last week. But also endorsements on that is highly appreciated. So I strongly urge you to check out the website and read up on it. It's super awesome, but it definitely needs support.
Chris, Joe, and Tammy here.
I also, before you ask your question, I just wanted to quickly say in 5 seconds, every Thursday we are down at Cesar Chavez and Potrero serving food. So if any of you would like to come out and meet the community and volunteer with us, I just wanted to say that because you are all living, I'm assuming, locally in Potrero Hill, and that this is your community, so I just wanted to extend that invite. Thursday at 3.
65 hot dogs for $20, and then we have the buns, so it's like $50.
That would be great.
Yeah. 3 o'clock.
So can I just say one thing on that? I don't want to start a West Side story here in San Francisco, but I do think you guys are in a unique position to have a discussion around recreational vehicles. The reason why a lot of people are here is because they've been pushed from the other side of town. So this is another shift of demographics that we're seeing people move into District 6 and into District 10. So to provide an alternative voice to the criminalization and to the policy making, you guys are pretty much the only similar neighborhood that could take on the West Side on this issue.
Let's do it.
Which we can do.
You know, I'm encouraged by the talk of decriminalization and the stuff that, different kind of housing, because I wonder why we think that there's almost a reaction that says if we had more resources, then we could solve the problem. And intuitively, I understand that. When you dig down deeper, it doesn't really make sense, actually. I mean, I guess if you said if we had $10 billion, but let's say realistically we could quadruple the amount of money we're spending, which seems like a lot. $1 billion. Well, if you look at the numbers and the solutions that we're currently proposing, $1 billion doesn't get us anywhere near to solving the problem. So, and what happens is, it makes us feel good to say we're going to increase the resources.
Yes.
But then at the end, it still seems like under the very best scenarios, there's still a few thousand people living on the streets. And I guess I'm just encouraged.
I think we've been hearing different numbers that are a lot lower than that, though, that actually might.
Yeah, but when you get a panel like this, they all seem reasonable. Those are very, I mean, I'm encouraged by them. But make no doubt about it, those are very radical proposals that are completely, that turn the current system upside down.
Well, look at parklets. What happened with parklets?
I mean,
We reclaim
I'm just
space, you know?
that these are radical proposals that would really shift the way that we're looking at this problem. And so the question here, because there is one, sorry.
Yeah, get to it, Chris. Come on.
Is there also an attempt citywide to say, okay, we know we're going to significantly increase resources, so now we're going to take 2 or 3 steps back, and we're going to look at this problem anew. And we're not going to do it in pieces, but we're really going to take a comprehensive look and really challenge ourselves around issues like, quite frankly, housing first, where the solution is $400,000. I mean,
see, but it isn't.
Well, this is interesting. Sorry, I get excited about this one because this is where the combination of the ideas coming out of, where is it, Sweden just recently gave people an income of, every single person gets an income, right?
Netherlands.
Is it Netherlands? There's an administrative cost that's really high. And I don't want to say there's a government, nonprofit, industrial complex, because it all has to happen. But we're spending, the Navigation Center costs more than regular shelters. We're spending about $6,000 per person to place them in a housing portfolio that we have full control over. It's our housing portfolio. Why does it cost $6,000 to put them in that? Because we're pushing papers around for 2 months, So there are relative gains that we can make within this. How do we stop the churn on benefits support? How do we draw down from federal resources? So I think there are definite gains, even relative on the administrative burden. And then that sort of thing is much more radical, and fixing our, tax structure is a whole different story. But we do see that it works in other places.
My question was, is there a plan to increase the public money, specifically coming from city budget? Because I think that at this point there probably is the political will to, to devote the kind of numbers, the kind of amounts that people are talking about to this problem within the city budget of San Francisco. Not necessarily waiting for some hero from the private sector or waiting for federal money, but actually just saying, we're actually going to devote city budget money to this problem.
There are multiple ballot measures. We have 2 endorsement meetings next month at this club, and the first one of those meetings is on ballot measures. And I think there's room in the bond coming up in June on this.
$20 million of the health and safety bond that is on the June ballot is earmarked for homeless shelter infrastructure and other, from the capital side.
And there's multiple discussions about November measures about operations. Tammy, quickly, Tammy here, and then here.
I'll be super quick. My name is Tammy Bryan. I live over in District 5, and I emailed my supervisor, London Reed, and I heard back from Emily, and I just really want to piggyback on what Amy's saying, that this is like a crisis now. We have to be more open to short-term solutions, and we have to do stuff immediately. And I'm hearing there's ways that can happen in 8 days. It needs to happen. There's $36,000 a person in our budget. we should be able to solve it. And the other thing I'm really disturbed about is the destruction and disposal of people's important documents and belongings. I've been talking to a lady with a dog at 16 to 11, and she said, I can't go to the shelter because DPW, this was weeks ago, threw out my belongings. So we have to, I think, as a city, replace the belongings immediately on the spot so that they can get that help they need. I don't want to look at people that can't go to a shelter because we threw out their SPCA papers and they can't afford to replace them. So just some simple stuff I'd like to see the city respond to, and thank you for the report and for all being here.
Thank you.
Do you have any statistics on, so we can, try to figure out, male, female, age-wise, are they getting displaced? I mean, do we have any statistics on, how old are, what's the age range?
Yeah,
Things like that, that would give us a feel for what the, where the solutions might be at based on
There's
what the problem
two great documents for that, the 2015 point in time count. So you can look that up tonight, the point in time count, 2015 point in time. And then the Coalition on Homelessness put out a really amazing report last year called Punishing the Poorest, and they have a lot of good statistics in there as well.
Which you can find on the website, on the Coalition of Homelessness, San Francisco Homeless Coalition website. I believe it's up there.
And I'm interested because Julie, you mentioned a couple times about demographic shifts in the population. Are you finding, are there more families now or less, more veterans or less?
I'll defer to Emily on that one because I don't work with families, so it
Right.
takes out a huge portion of the population.
Families, the data is not particularly great, but it's relatively stable in terms of, in San Francisco. Nationwide, families are the fastest growing segment of the homeless population, and nationwide, the average age of a homeless person is like 9 years old. This is an issue that impacts kids and families, not as much in San Francisco as in a lot of other, I mean, it's still a huge problem, like, don't get me wrong, you're looking at it like, but I'm saying,
2,000 homeless kids.
yes,
Yeah.
and school districts have great data on this.
Yeah.
Now, the definition of a homeless child in the school district is different than HUD, but doesn't matter, they're kids that need to be housed. And really exciting new partnership between the school district and Hamilton Family Center. It has some Google money in it, talking about philanthropy, to create a system where we identify homeless and at-risk kids right away and get them rehoused as quickly as possible or prevent them from becoming homeless if they're at risk or doubled up. It's a really exciting new partnership. They have money for a 2-year grant to pilot this, but it's looking like something that could really go a lot bigger and is probably a pretty attractive thing for philanthropy, as we were talking about before. But it's an exciting partnership, and really the first time, not necessarily the first time, but the school district is at the table in a big way, and that's going to be key because that's a fairly trusted institution for families rather than the homeless system. So it's great to have them as such a big partner in this project.
Gary, then here, then me.
I'd like to follow up on the question that the person asked about finding out how to volunteer for organizations. The question is, how many organizations are there in San Francisco that deal with homeless issues?
Oh, they're getting less and
A
less.
lot.
Yeah, but they are getting
Yeah, they
less
are.
and less. It's
Still, instead of that relative thing, how many numbers? Is it 100, 50,
couldn't-
200?
I couldn't say the exact amount. Never. I could, if you gave me like a couple of minutes, I could probably count them.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is Sam Dodge spoke at the hearing and said that one of the biggest issues right now is these nonprofits are not connected in the way they should be. So the city's working on a database that is going to create a cohesive way to link the services and then, kind of send people, similar to like what the Navigation Center does, but having that system is crucial, and that's also in development.
In addition,
Yeah. Right.
Where there's costs
Right.
for administration, but the dollars then aren't going down to the issues.
I also just want to put a little plug in for, I mentioned downtown streets, but I think one of the biggest missing pieces in our system here, if we don't even have to rely on the system to do this, right? But people don't have anything to do during the day. At least the folks that I work with, they really don't have anything to do. There are institutions of worship have left, or are they called institutions of worship? That's what I work in, I suppose. Anyway, places where people have to gather in a community sense are shrinking here. People need to be engaged in stuff. So casual participation, working shoulder to shoulder with someone, doing some volunteer work. You know, you don't have to go somewhere else to take 6 brooms down, get to know your folks, pass out some sandwiches, and you guys all clean up together. You know, like that type of stuff builds relationships, and I can't tell you how important it is. We did projects with just basic levels of volunteer participation according to their ability and skill. Not only did people have something to do during the day, but their engagement in services and trust building activities went up extremely. So it has an amplifying effect, and it really makes the community better.
And I'll put a plug in for Emily's old work. The Project Homeless Connect puts on amazing events, and people can get involved. There's amazing amounts of and so with the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge, we have our survey online, www.stfrancischallenge.com. We've had about 780 people have taken the quiz and signed up so far for the challenge. And we've had a tremendous response at the 2 different pop-up events that we had. We had one at Soma Arts, and we had one at the Street Food Park. And we had about 50 volunteers at each one. And I think the coolest thing about those events is that there really was a breakdown of barriers between unhoused and housed. And so people were all spending time together. And, the volunteers actually got to engage with people like by sitting next to them and eating a meal or getting acupuncture together. And that was really great to see that breakdown where you couldn't really tell the difference between whether someone was housed or unhoused.
Last 2 questions, you and me.
Yeah, Jason, I just have Shira, you mentioned that LA spending something like 80% of their money that they have on policing and criminalizing the homeless population. And there's this number, 241 million that we're spending that does not include policing or criminalization projects. Does anyone have the number for how much we're spending on policing? Because the way I see it, if we stop the criminalization, that frees up a lot of money right now that could be put towards.
So Chris would, yes, and Chris would be the one to ask about. Chris, go for it.
Yeah, the researcher who worked with the coalition on the report on punishing the poorest, and out of that, we got Supervisor Noir to submit a legislative analyst office request on this. It's coming out this April on that cost, but it's something that the city does not track. They don't even track it. We did Freedom of Information Act request. By our estimates, the city does have 23 officers whose full-time 8-hour shift a week job is dedicated to only handling homelessness calls. So that's obviously a big portion of the budget. And then they're looking at a number of other factors, especially since on any given night, 25% of people in jail are people experiencing homelessness and various other costs. So there'll be a hearing on that probably sometime in May.
So that's millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars. And actually, I was just in Sacramento last week, and a huge portion of the budget too also goes to emergency services. So as Julie was saying about our sicker and older and aging, which we are seeing in real time, unhoused people with their peers, they go to the emergency room probably 5 to 10 more times a year at least, which that cost is also factored into the homeless budget, which is also super important to look at. And then also of those 23 officers, 13 of them are centered in the Haight, which has the highest youth population too, which is also very important to them.
And by point of
Do they
comparison,
take it?
like, what's the actual
Or are they the
budget?
homeless outreach officers? Or both?
I mean, we are not a department, we're just an office.
For your office?
I don't know, Julie, do you know the budget of our office? It's 5 FTE and we have to know spending.
Exactly. It's probably Majority Navigation Center.
So basically it's about $45 or so.
And in that Punishing the Poorest report, I think it said $3 million is allocated to DPW for clearing encampments each year.
So we're at curfew for this discussion. So we've heard about Pog Homeless Connect, that's something like we can do, by the way, St. Francis Homelessness Challenge, something we can do.
Go big or go
Quick little
homeless.
quick little
It's our
plug.
national campaign for finding a space for the Homeless Youth Alliance, sorry. Go big or go
You're looking
homeless.
for a space.
Yeah, looking for a space to have a drop-in center for our kids.
In the hate, right?
In the hate.
In the hate.
Or, we can.
We wanted you guys to hang out.
Anything else as far as what we can do as citizens, you know, quickly?
I mean, continue the advocacy, not just at the city level, but at the federal level as well. And when affordable housing, you know, projects are slated in your community, when, you know, shelter or other things, services need to come in, be the anti-NIMBY ally, because we really need those types of allies to help site in services as well as permanent housing for folks.
So I deployed a RouteHome on my front lawn in the Castro. If you want to house a neighbor on your front lawn, we can build you a RouteHome.
Yeah, it was good.
It's a unique situation.
The hillside.
I also think it's really important too. Everything that we've talked about is so amazing and so great, and it has the ability to make such positive change. But also the importance of just remembering that our unhoused folks are human beings, and to be able to say hello is got such a huge, powerful thing in just that by itself.
And they do use the money you give them.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of giving people money. They need it.
Yeah, buy hand-up cards.
We're not adjourned, only President Eisen can do that, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Any other wrap-up remarks that you want to ask them to do that?
Oh, we just asked them about what we could do, and they did that. I think we're.
Thanks so much for having me.
They've talked a lot.
Just thank you. It was great.
The 2 meetings next month, right? The 2 meetings next month. We should, we have 2
And
meetings.
thanks for the wine.
and they're endorsement meetings.
Yeah, look this over because I
April 5th
tried
and
to
April 12th.
do it.